Hey guys, how's it going? Jam here, and happy Christmas! This video is my Christmas Day video, and that means it is definitely Christmassy themed. It's Christmassy themed in the loosest way possible, but it is Christmassy themed, so happy Christmas! Yes, I know I've said that twice already. So yeah, the first car up in today's Christmas special of the Track Build Battle series is the Opel Manta, and it's the cars that have the Christmassy connection, as well as the terrible pun in the title. Because the Opel Manta sounds a lot like Santa. That counts. That definitely counts as a Christmas connection. It definitely counts. You gotta let me have it. You gotta let me have it, because it's only gonna get worse later on. I mean, it's only one letter difference, Santa, Manta. Come on. Anyway, yeah. Sort of unpleasantries over. Let's move on to sort of the normalities of these videos, and start by looking at how the Manta looks on paper. With the Forza stats, it has 6.5 in the way of top speed. Again, that doesn't really make much because we're not actually going to be hitting this car's top speed, but we do hit 152 miles an hour as we go into turn 1, which I would normally say is above average, but lately everything's been exceeding 150 miles an hour, so maybe not so. Potentially a little bit down on some of the faster cars in this series. It also has 5.8 for handling and braking, which is impressive. Yeah, I think that's very much up there with some of the better handling cars. I think we've had one or two that have been 6 or higher. I think one of the Silvias and maybe the R33 Skyline. But, what was it R33? The Nismo thingy. I can't remember which one it was. Anyway, I'm waffling again, and to finish off the Forza stats, it has 8.6 in terms of acceleration. So the actual vital statistics of this car has nearly 400 horsepower, 320 foot-pounds of torque, weighs in at just under 2,400 pounds, which is really rather light by this series standards, but then it doesn't really have that much horsepower compared to some of the cars that we've had lately. But then again, all the cars we've had lately have been muscle cars, so who knows how it's going to compare. The Forza stats mean, well, yeah, judging by the Forza stats, this could be really competitive. But it's been muscle cars that have been really competitive. So, who knows? We'll find out later on when we have a look at the fastest lap. So yeah, it weighs in at just under 2,400 pounds, and the tyre sizes are 255 on the front and 275s on the rear. So, not great. As I keep mentioning, I've been driving a lot of muscle cars lately, so I've been having much bigger tyres to use. But this car is a lot smaller, a lot lighter, and a lot less powerful than the muscle cars, so maybe the smaller tyre sizes aren't really going to be that much of an issue. And when driving around on track, it didn't really feel like it. I had an Opel Manta on Forza 6, and no matter what I did to it, it was a real oversteer machine. So I was potentially concerned that it was going to be the same on Forza 7. However, it wasn't really the case. I mean, yes, it slid around relatively easily, but on the most part, it was actually quite nice to drive. A little quirk of this car comes in the way of its aero. Now, you may be able to see that there isn't really a front splitter on the front, and that's because you can't put one on. It has adjustable aero from standard, and I just added the Forza rear wing. As you may recall, one of the rules for the builds in this series is that the cars must have Forza or race adjustable aero. And it's something that I've been sticking to, at least on the most part, apart from when the body kits seem to interfere. Now, I'm no motorsport scientist. I don't really understand how downforce works in the deepest terms. I have a rough understanding, enough to be able to tune a little bit with it on the likes of Forza Motorsport. And so I can tell that via the stats that the game gives, the amount of downforce that this car actually has is really small. Normally, the maximum downforce you get from Forza Aero is like 100 pounds of downforce on the front and 200 on the rear. And none of that is going to help when I go for a roll just to justify the title. But yeah, this car has a lot less than that. I think it's about 25 and 40. So yeah, I've waffled on actually a little bit too long. I did go for a little bit of a roll just to try and get a pun in the title. So let's move over to the second car in this episode. And the second car in today's episode is the Ford Crown Victoria. Now look, I told you that the Christmas connections weren't going to get any stronger, and so prepare for a little bit of explanation as to why this car is Christmassy themed. Now this car, as I've just mentioned, is called the Ford Crown Victoria. Now there's a TV show called Victoria, which is about Queen Victoria, and said TV show is having a Christmas special that is airing today as you're watching this. I don't know what time today, probably not exactly as you're watching this, but then it depends on when you're watching it. So yeah, it shares a name with a TV show that is having a Christmas special. That is all I could think of. I went through every car that starts in A class or below that I could potentially use in this series, and like nothing had a name that was a Christmassy connection. I mean, you should have known it wasn't going to be great after starting out with Manta, just because it sounds like Santa. The only other thing that I even came close to using was basically any Aston Martin, because there's always a Bond film on at Christmas, so I probably would have gone for the DB5. But yeah, Christmas connections were not aplenty in the car world, so I went for a bit of a Christmassy pun in the title as well, and I had to do something a little bit special to justify it, just by potentially rolling the cars, or intentionally rolling the cars on the grass at the end of this little segment. And yes, this one will go for a roll as well. Little challenge for you. Think in the comments down below, see if you can suggest any Christmas named cars. There aren't any on Forza that I could see, but yeah, see if you can come up with any better than I did. Right, anyway, so that's a lap down in the Crown Vic already, and we need to move on to how it performed, starting with the stats. 6.9 for the top speed, as always, doesn't really mean a huge deal, but it did mean that it could get up to 155 miles an hour before turning into turn 1, which is rather impressive. I don't think it is the fastest that we've had. I think I said this the same the other week. I can't remember if it was last episode or the episode before with one of the Mustangs or the muscle cars or the Charger or the Nova, but getting up to 155 miles an hour is mighty impressive. It does lack a little bit compared to the Manta in terms of handling though, potentially to be expected because this is a much bigger and heavier car. It's got 5.6 handling compared to the Opel Manta's 5.8. It shares 8.6 acceleration with the Manta as well as 5.8 braking. And so the Forza stats are actually relatively similar considering how different the cars appear elsewhere on paper, because they're not similar anymore. This Crown Vic is actually the most modified car that I've run so far in this series, because it's the first car that has an engine swap. If your ears are somehow phenomenally acute, is that the right word? It might be, I'm not sure. You may be able to tell that the engine sounds rather different, because this is not the stock engine in the car. This is a 6.2 litre V8 with an added supercharger, pumping out 625 horsepower and 625 pounds. See if I can get that number out again. 625 horsepower and 625 foot-pounds of torque. But it does weigh 3,332 pounds, which is nearly 1,000 pounds heavier than the Manta. So that extra 300 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque, or thereabouts, is rather required. And it doesn't really help that the car still only has 275 rear tyres, which is the same as the little lightweight Manta. Although it does have slightly bigger tyres at the front, so this car has 275s all round, whereas the Manta has 255s on the front and 275s on the rear. So yeah, this car is highly modified. The supercharger that I added to the 6.2 litre V8 engine wasn't necessarily a complete and utter requirement, but it was struggling to get to the top of A-Class. I might have got there without the added addition of the supercharger, but I wanted to be able to play around with some of the parts a little bit more, so I did add that. But anyway, I've been waffling on for far too much this video, and I've actually had to do it in 2 takes because I messed up the audio on the first time. Typical. So, with another Christmas car roll, I love it, it's brilliant. That is going to signal the end of this part of the video, and we'll move on to the next part where we'll see which fastest lap was fastest. So now for the bit of the video where I talk fast and make no sense even more than usual. Going down into turn 1, you'd expect the Ford to be slightly quicker, but they're looking pretty neck and neck as we change camera. Going around turn 1, the Ford takes a little bit of inside curb. The Opel Santa making most of the exit curbing though, breaking down into turn 2, that I often call turn 1 by mistake. It looks as though the Manta is now slightly ahead, bit more light, bit more nimble, a bit better around the slow corners, and it's looking like it's only extended its advantage down towards the first Degner. Both of them cutting it nicely and avoiding using too much exit curb. Both cleanly around the second Degner as well, and again both using minimal exit curb, which is quite uncommon. A lot of cars use a lot of curbs. Going into the hairpin, and the Santa really showing its dominance at this point in the lap, kicking up a bit of tyre smoke as it exits the hairpin. The Ford not doing so. Maybe it clawed back a little bit of time there, but going into the very nimble alternate chicane, and it's still the Santa leading by some margin. Just look at that delay in the camera change. Quite a quick run in towards the final corner now. Should perhaps suit the Ford a little bit, but I think the gap's just too big to close at this point. Going round Spoon, the Manta, or the Santa, was using again a little bit more of the track that it had available. The Ford leaving a little bit of time on the table, and now we drag towards the line where again the Ford should be quicker, but it's just so far behind. What about that? The Opel Manta absolutely dominating, and as it was so dominant, I'm going to leave you in suspense, and we'll find out how it got on at the very end of the episode. For now, we can see that the Ford Crown Vic, rather unspectacular 11th place, a very, very close margin ahead of the Mercedes-Benz A45 AMG, and now for the Manta goes 3rd place. It's quite a successful Christmas special, that really, isn't it? The Opel Manta stopping the dominance of the 1960s muscle cars. So now we've got a 26.1, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. So we just need something to do a 26.2 and we'll have the full set. But anyway, that is it for this episode. As always, leave a comment if you've got anything to say. Remember what I said about earlier in the video. Hit the like button if you did enjoy. And join me again for the next episode where we're putting 2 more cars to the test. But until then, goodbye.